Hi, my name is Melena Vanderford. Welcome to my virtual bubble. Don't worry, it's sanitized. I'm a freshman here at Adams State University, and my major is clinical psychology. Whenever I've thought about GPA in the past, I've solely associated it with hard work. Not that hard work is not a factor, but I now realize how ignorant I was of all the other factors that contribute to GPA and how important that they are. This brings me to my topic of psychosocial factors and their effect on GPA. Excuse me. One of the reasons I find this topic so relevant is because of the many demographics that it affects. There we go. Oh no. Okay. The first one is students. Students are affected by GPA in the manner that it affects the amount of scholarship money they receive, the colleges or grad schools that they're accepted into, and their simple ability to stay enrolled. Next, we have the poor souls who have to put up with us. Yes, the teachers. Especially in Colorado, I know that teachers are affected a great deal because in 2004, the Denver Classroom Teachers Association implemented the pay for performance plan. And it basically does exactly what it says, and it pays teachers and gives teachers more raises based on the performance of their students, which is great because only God knows how much they really deserve to put up with us. Next, we have parents, and they also kind of fit into this in an obvious way. Most parents, at least hopefully most parents, want the best for their children, and they want to see them have the most income, best school opportunities, or what have you for their children. Lastly, we have state, and state's affected by GPA because depending on the average GPA or standardized test scores that the schools receive, that can affect the amount of money that is allotted to each state by the government, which can affect the resources that the schools have and how much they can spend each year. So now that we know a little bit about the demographics that are affected by GPA, let's take a look at what actually affects GPA. We're going to be looking at 4 different factors today. Those are anxiety and depression, social support, socioeconomics, and race. And later I'll discuss why I put those in the same category. And lastly, food insecurity. So let's jump in. Anxiety and depression is something that millions of people face on a daily basis around the globe. But many would be surprised to find that the first symptoms of depression are often experienced in college. And that was brought to me by the National Institute of Mental Health, and they published that in 2012. This is important because also the National College Health Association recorded from 2011 to 2016 that stress was the number one negative impactor of GPA by 30 to 34%, compared to factors such as physical well-being, which only had a 20 to 24% factor rate. So some other evidence to back this up was a study done by Patricia, Addie, and Abigail in 2019, and they also found that higher stress was associated with lower GPAs. And this is really critical because in college, every college student knows the amount of stress that we're under to keep our GPAs up or get the assignments done on time, write that 2,000-word essay or what have you. So being able to cope with and manage stress is an extremely important skill, especially that we know how much of an effect it has on GPA. Social support, when I start discussing it, I can't help but find it slightly comical. I reminisce to my senior year in high school, which I know was only last year. But whenever I remember my peers and my friends daydreaming about the independence and freedom they would find out of the households of their parents and in their dorm rooms of the college campuses they would be attending, it's funny because they never realized the importance of family and that social support from family actually increases in GPA and has an extremely strong tie to GPA. That was some information brought to me by Malecki and Demaray. They published that in 2006, and I hope I'm saying their names right, but there's plenty of names in here I do not know how to pronounce. So those are probably better out of the others. And many students would argue that when they get to college, they develop new social networks and romantic relations that would make up for and combat the decrease in family support. But it was actually found that peer support and romantic partners had little to no effect on GPA in a positive manner. However, when students are placed in high social stress, it can have negative impacts on GPA as well as well-being. And that's mainly due to the anxiety and depression that we talked about earlier and how that affects GPA. Excuse me. Next, we're talking about the relevance really of that statement. And in 2012, 3 researchers, Cheng, X, and there's a name I don't know how to pronounce, Verhofstadt, I'm just gonna say that, they found that students who reported high in social support had lower cognitive interference and higher rates of concentration when performing difficult tasks such as anagram tests. And that really has strong significance because in college, we're asked to write essays in a allotted time or complete tests in 15 minutes. And there's a lot of stress associated in that. And if family support has a significant tie to that, it's important to make sure that students do have that strong social tie to their family. This brings me to my next topic. We were ignorant of it as children, desired it as teens, stressed about it as adults. And to be quite frank, not a single one of us will give a flying cahoot about it when we're dead. Money. Talking about money, my friends. A research report that I read by Page and Forrester found that household incomes had a huge effect on GPA. In fact, household incomes that reported greater than 75,000, most or almost all students reported GPAs greater than or equal to 2.0. Conversely, household incomes that were less than 50,000, almost all students had GPAs less than or equal to 2.0. But not only this, they found a significant p-value of 0.001. Something to really keep in mind when we're talking about socioeconomics is the strong tie that it holds to race. As I talked about when we first began this, race and SES are strongly tied, and especially underrepresented minorities. In fact, in 1863, Black Americans held 1% of national wealth. Today, they hold only 1.5%. In addition, between 1963 and 2013, white household income has risen 14%. That might not seem like much, but when compared to Hispanic household income decreasing 50% and Black household income decreasing 75%, rising 14% might seem like a little bit more a big deal. Some other factors to consider is that low parental education has also been linked to lower GPA, as well as family dysfunction. And when we're talking about family dysfunction, this in households of poverty or low SES, family dysfunction is quite commonly found more often, but it also ties us into social support, because when children and students are found in low social support backgrounds, they tend to have lower GPAs, as talked about earlier. Food insecurity is not something I've ever had to deal with in my life, even now as a college student. So it really surprised me to find out that 35 to 45% of college students experience food insecurity. And something to really keep in mind is that while 30 to 45% of college students experience food insecurity, there are 3 main target groups that I found in my literature review. And those target groups were first generation, low SES, and minority students. And something to really back this up, a study that I read by Hickey, Shields, and Henning in 2019, they reported that students who self-reported hunger had lower GPAs and higher rates of anxiety and depression. And anxiety and depression has also been linked to lower GPA. But this is really alarming because having accessibility to food is really not much that students have control over. So when it starts to affect their GPA, that can really bring on stress, and they probably already have a low SES. These are just really compiling and they build off one another, and it's really scary to see what students really might be dealing with. we've been mainly talking about problems that students have to deal with and adversities they have to face in college. So I really like to talk about some solutions that could be implemented and possibly already are implemented on this campus or any campus around the United States or world. In one of the research reports that I read, I found something called the Penn Resiliency Program. It was first developed in Pennsylvania, and it was used to combat depression with something called mental fitness training. And mental fitness training helps develop emotional regulation, attention, goal-making skills, and other cognitive behavioral techniques. And this can really be used to help depression, anxiety, stress, and even low social support. Next, we have increasing social opportunities on campus. Even while I said earlier that peer groups and romantic partners do not seem to have much of an effect on GPA, if those peer groups are developed and cultivated in the correct way, they can have a strong sense of building reassurance of self-worth, which has been tied positively to GPA. So if we create clubs of self-love and create social opportunities that promote that, that can really have a strong effect on GPA. Next, we have financial advisors. And financial advisors are extremely important, especially to students who come from low SES backgrounds, because their parents probably have not dealt with college and the adversities of college and trying to figure out how to navigate the financial responsibilities of it. So having that available to you is a huge resource, and it's really needed. But not only that, but financial support. And as it stands, university tuition and student debt is skyrocketing, and many low SES students may not even become students because they know that down the road they're not going to be able to pay off that student debt, or they're afraid of going into debt and just really just being stressed out the rest of their lives. So that's extremely important. Next, we have destigmatization. As sad as it is, our culture really puts a lot of stigma around organizations and groups that are meant to help others. Things like food pantries, food stamps, EBT cards, counseling, therapists. There's all a certain amount of stigma that surrounds those. So it's really important when we have things like this, and I know that our campus does have a food pantry, which I'm extremely grateful for, that we create things like enthusiastic advertising, or even create an organization or club that goes around bi-weekly or once a month to students' doors and ask them if they need anything. So that way those students aren't targeted out and have to go to the food pantry and be seen by their peers or friends and feel that stigma and feel that embarrassment. Lastly is honestly what I think is the most important of all these solutions, and that is screening. If you screen for all of these factors, you screen for depression and anxiety, you screen for food insecurity and low SES, you are not only becoming aware of the problem, but by becoming aware of the problem, you're going to be able to implement solutions because awareness is the first step, and without it, you don't know what the problem is and you don't know how to implement any solutions. While I'm extremely grateful for the literature that's available to me, because I know that many people do not have that availability and those resources open for them, it's important when conducting any research or literary review, as I am doing, to acknowledge and address the gaps that are found in it. I found 4 main gaps that were present in my literature review. The first one was that some of the studies I read had limited sample sizes. And I think something that's commonly believed is that if a campus or college campus that has high population will automatically have large sample sizes when it comes to research. But what I found was that that's not always necessarily true, because even if you do have a high population campus, there can be a low level of willing participants to go into your study. And when you do have low sample size, that can really be a big hesitator to how much you take in that results and how much you really put that into your research or into your knowledge. Because as sample size go up, error goes down, but if your sample size is really low, you might have error skyrocketing through the roof. The next gap that I found was the limited longitudinal studies. I only found 2 longitudinal studies, and one of them was pertaining to middle schoolers. But the reason I find longitudinal studies so relevant is because when we're talking about things like GPA and how it's affected by these factors, we want to know, is depression and stress affecting GPA just in that first year when students are having to acclimate to new environments? Or is that food insecurity and depression affecting students on a longer scale, and is it affecting them throughout their entire education, or just in that first year when they're having to acclimate? The third gap I found was inconclusive results. And while I didn't find a lot of this, which I'm grateful for, it is important to realize that some studies did have inconclusive results or did not find significant results in their data. So you really have to pay attention to that and not just go down to the results and say, oh, there was a finding and there was a significance. You really have to read that and pay attention to it. The last gap I became aware of was specific to this PowerPoint. And it's because I'm doing research and review on all of these variables, but I'm not sure on how all of them interact with each other. How does depression and anxiety affect food insecurity and vice versa? And what is the effect size of each one on GPA singularly and together? And as I was talking about earlier, there's really kind of a domino effect that happens with all of these most of the time. And it's really important to know how all of them affect GPA and how that one student is all in all affected. As I was talking about, I'm extremely grateful for the literature, but I'm also extremely grateful for Dr. Casper because she's the one who first got me into Student Scholar Days. I took a FYS class with her last semester, and its theme was food insecurity. After the class, she asked me if I wanted to conduct some research with her on food insecurity and its effect on GPA. She'd remembered that my major was psychology, so she implemented some psychological factors into that. So now we are writing a peer-reviewed article on all these 4 variables and their effect on GPA. We hope to get it published in a scholarly magazine, and so that we can bring more awareness to students and faculty members of colleges, because this really is an important thing to be aware of. Because I think that even as teachers, it's easy to be upset with students when they're not doing well or it doesn't seem like they're trying, but there might be a lot of factors that are contributing to that. So awareness is the first step, and by helping writing this article, I think that I'm really contributing to the awareness and the spread of this knowledge to other students and faculty. And I would really like to thank Dr. Casper for that opportunity and the guidance she's given me throughout this research. Before I close, I would also like to thank the viewers, because without you guys, I wouldn't be here. I wish that this could be in person, but since it's not, we'll just have to do it how it is and to make the most of it. So I am grateful for all of you and thank you for viewing. And what would a presentation be without its resources? So here are some beautiful resources and the researchers responsible for it. I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Maybe next year we can be in person and I can see all your beautiful faces and we can discuss and conversate and all of those things that are not very possible virtually. But thank you all very much. Bye. Oh, I have to stop sharing. Okay. Bye.